Welcome to the second webinar in our OER Colorado webinar series. This is about adapting open educational resources, and we're excited to have you with us today. We're going to do a little bit of review at the beginning. Some of you joined us last week for our first webinar, which is excellent. If you weren't able to, we did record it, and that's available to you. We do want to encourage you to share your name and role in the chat box. So some people really enjoy the chat box. It's a great way to make your thinking visible. Other folks get a little bit overwhelmed by the chat box. So if you need to leave it closed, that's okay. You might just want to choose to unmute to introduce yourself, but the chat box is a great spot for us to get everyone sharing their information. So if you'll put your name and your role, what institution you work at, how familiar are you with OER? And then if you give us a little bit of context, today we're talking about adapting educational materials. So we'd love to know how familiar are you with adapting resources? So as we go along here, we know that we'll have a wide variety of experiences. We have people who have Creative Commons certificates as part of their experience and who commonly adapt and create resources. We might have people who this is very new to. So one thing that I do want to share with you is that if some of the licensing information that we go over real quickly today feels like a lot of new things for you, we will be sure to share last session's recording where you can go back and dive deeper into that. Our agenda for today, there's a lot that we'll be getting through today, but there is some of it that's really just a review. So we always want to use those best pedagogical strategies of sprinkle, pour, sprinkle. So we're going to do a little bit of reviewing today just to make sure that things are fresh on top of your head. And then we're going to dig into the why and how of remixing and adapting OER. After today's session, you should be able to do all of these things. At what level, that kind of depends on what you're coming in with, what experience you're coming in with. But we're excited today to really focus on accessibility design and be thinking about our learner profiles and how those can sometimes be jagged, right? So what a student can do one day might not be what a student can do the next day. And so one of these big values of accessibility and OER is that you can modify your OER at any time as long as it has the correct license. So we'll show you an evaluation rubric that might be helpful for you as you think about what you want to change, and we'll help you create a plan for how you might want to adapt OER in the future. I think I see Teresa is on our call. So I'm going to hand it over to Teresa to introduce herself and give you a quick background about the OER Colorado site itself.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I am Teresa Becker. I am currently the Professional Development Coordinator for the OER Colorado project. The OER Colorado project comes about from Colorado Revised statute for setting up a repository of free curriculum for teachers. And Colorado River BOCES was designated to set up that repository in partnership with the Colorado Department of Education for Pre-K-12. We know that open educational resources are often found in higher education here in the state of Colorado. So this is our sort of our introduction of bringing open education and OER into that pre-K-12 sphere. We're excited to have everybody here today and excited for you to learn more about this teaching resource. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. She's such a wonderful leader. I really love getting to work with Teresa and the rest of the OER Colorado team. We do want to just give you a really quick view of the OER Colorado microsite. Hopefully you have already set up your account. Just a side note that it is free and open to create an account on OER Colorado, but that is only to people who have a certain subset of email addresses. So not everyone can create an account. Everyone can see it, but the OER Colorado accounts for modifying, evaluating, creating, and saving. Those are just for pre-K through 12 educators in Colorado with a aligned email address to that. So here's the microsite, as we call it. I'm from ISKME. I'm Joanna Scamitzi. I think I forgot to say that. I'm a professional learning specialist with ISKME, help supporting OER. I'm also a high school biology teacher. I teach students with disabilities that are in separate setting classrooms. And I love talking about OER because my own son is one student who needs his resources modified. He's much more successful. This definition of accessibility, when we talk about every learner being able to engage and participate, my own son is much more successful when he's able to access the material with some modifications. And so today we'll be talking about how to real quickly search on the platform, save, but even more importantly, how to adapt and modify resources, especially for some of our populations that are much more successful when their resources have customizations. So if you haven't yet signed up for an account, then now is a great time to do that. The other thing that we want to point out is that there are what are called hubs. These are organizational features that create kind of like a hierarchical organization within the microsite. And so you can go to hubs and you can explore some of the things that you might want to be able to learn about and join and participate in so that you can find some other educators that you might want to work with and see the resources that they're using. For today, we're going to make sure that you are able to join our webinar group. Our webinar group is going to be really helpful for giving you a chance to practice, but also giving you a chance to stay in contact with each other after today. So we know that these 90 minutes will fly by, and we look forward to being able to stay in touch with you from now until the fall when our third webinar is. So if you haven't yet joined this group, I did put the link in the chat box. You can, once you are logged in, you'll probably see a button here that says join this group if you haven't yet joined. So I'll pause there for a minute and invite you to join the group if you haven't yet.
Has everybody been able to register for the site? If you haven't, let us know in the chat box and we can put the other slide up for registering for the site as well.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, and I am actually going to put that link to the published slide deck in, and that way, just one more time, and that way folks can have it on their own, in their own tab if they need to. Great. As you're finishing that, you might be noticing the discussion boards that are in there. During some of your work time, I'm going to hear and talk and think about what is important to you all and post a webinar discussion board for today as well that we'll get to at the very end. If you're interested in creating a group, anyone can do that. You'll just want to tag up with Teresa to make sure that the group might also want to live on one of the hubs or be connected to another existing group. So as we get started, we want to kind of ground ourselves in this idea of what is open education. When you ask people why they are educators, a big reason is that they want to remove barriers, right? They want to make learning accessible. They want all students to be able to engage. And so open education is this idea of really being able to widen and open access and participation. And OER, open educational resources, are one piece of that. And so we're going to do a quick review of what that technical definition of OER is. If you're finding yourself feeling really connected to this idea, you can also connect with the organization Spark or the Go Open network. So those links are embedded there. So as we mentioned, OER are resources that you can customize and remix for the most part. We're going to look at a quick review of the different types of licenses. So just in a quick grounding, anytime that someone makes an original work, last week we talked about if I sang a lullaby to my son and I made up the words and I made up the tune and that was my lullaby. In the United States, it automatically gets protected by copyright, whether I register it or not. And anyone who wants to re-sing my lullaby or change the melody, they would have to get permission from me directly. They don't have any released rights to do that without my specific permission. And that's what full copyright is. Public domain is on the other side of that spectrum, which is where it's been released entirely. You don't have to get any sort of permission or give any sort of attribution. Most creators, especially educators, struggle a little bit with that. And Creative Commons is a nonprofit that created a set of licenses and licensing terms so that authors, creators could retain some of the rights and privileges and release some of that. And so those are the Creative Commons licenses that help us shift from this idea of all rights reserved to some rights reserved. As a really quick review, there are 4 main different terms of licenses. The attribution license is CC BY, which requires anyone who's using it to give attribution to the original creator. ND, if we review this, it means no derivatives. You can only use it exactly the way that it was. So if we think about that lullaby, CC BY, if Teresa decides to perform my lullaby in a concert and I've put a CC BY license on my lullaby, she can perform it in a concert. She can change the melody in the background. She could translate it into a different language. Open educational resources allow others to use them and modify them in a lot of different ways. However, if I felt like my lullaby needed to be sung exactly the way that I had written it, but I wanted to still let other people use it or share it, then I could put an ND license on it. Share alike, as a reminder, is a term in the license that requires others to use the same license as myself. So if I put CC BY SA on it and Teresa decides to use it, she can't put, she can make a derivative because I only put CC BY SA on my lullaby, but she can't put an ND on her own. She has to keep the same license that I gave it. If I add non-commercial as a term to my license, then that means that with that lullaby, it could not be performed for profit. So it could be performed at a school event. It could be performed for free, but anyone who is performing or using it in any way cannot make money from it. So it can't be put in an anthology on a CD and then sold. So that's a really quick review of the Creative Commons licenses terms that can be combined in a lot of different ways. For today's focus, we're really going to be talking about how we want to be able to adapt resources. So we're going to have to pay really close attention to see if I adapt resources, do I have the licensing rights to do that? So we'll come back to that and licensing rights in a little bit. First, we want to give you a chance to find some OER that you're interested in. I'm going to do about a 2-minute preview review of how to find OER on OER Colorado, and then we'll give you some time to look and find something that you'll use later today. So when you visit OER Colorado, if you go to the main homepage, there's a medium, right? Medium supportive toolbar here in the middle for searching. I'll show you real quickly. Here is the same type of toolbar. So you can start by just putting in some keywords or phrases, but then you can also add some of these filters to get you started already. If you really like to do advanced searching from the beginning, you can use the advanced search button and you can go ahead and drill down to specific standards, search by language. And as we'll practice in just a minute, we want to also be able to search by license type, because if I know that I want to be able to remix what I find, I don't want to find things that are restricted use. I don't want to find things that are no derivative, because I know I want to be able to change it. Once you do that searching, then you can actually save your resources. So let's say that I'm going to look for some resources about economic terms. And so when I do that, oops, it's not going to be in NextGen. When I do that search, it's going to come up with a specific number of search results. I can click that square at the top. It'll bring up the toolbar to save. Now, this is one of my favorite things about the search results is directly from here, I can save them right into a folder. I might want to create a new folder. It's one of my 2024 goals is to be really organized. So this might just be my search from May 14th is the name of this folder. And I'll put that folder under economic terms, create, and then save those resources there. And it'll let me know that they were saved. The resources still exist for anyone else to find and access, but now kind of copies or bookmarks of those are saved under my items. I can go up to my avatar at the top and I can look for my items. And once I go there, I can go to my folder and I can find my resources that I saved here. The other way to do it is you can click things individually. So even once I'm in this folder, I can save copies of this maybe to a folder I'm sharing with Teresa in a group. And so I can click those, click save. And then for ours, our webinar today, we're in this group, I might save it to our items to review folder. And that way you all would be able to find those items in our shared folder. So in just a minute, you're going to be doing some searching on your own. We want you to be able to find some OER that align with the work that you're doing. We just want to make sure that you kind of understand these big ideas of OER. Can I retain it, revise it, remix it, right? So the difference between remix and revise is just kind of changing what's there. Remix is when you add new things to it. So when you really think about DJs and remixing, they're combining tracks of music, they're adding additional sounds and resources and texts. And so that's kind of the difference between revise, which is just changing what's there, and remix, which is combining new things. Reusing it and then redistributing it, right? So using it in my class and with my students versus distributing it to a wider audience. So we're going to take a minute here, a little bit more than a minute. We'll take about 5 minutes here for you to search. And what we're going to do is ask you to find a resource that permits derivatives. So when you're searching, you can choose to click the licenses that allow for remixing, or you can, yes, you would want to click all of the ones that allow for remixing. So if you want to follow along with me for just a minute, you go to the search and advanced search. And you could type in your keyword, right? So mine is economic terms. And I'm going to go down to the license types. And if I click next to license types, it checks all of them. But I want to uncheck the no derivative ones because I know that I want to remix it. There is a part about reading the fine print, and that can be really complicated, but some resources have been licensed that way. So you could leave it. You just have to make sure that you look closely for the copyright terms. So I'm going to play a little music for you while you search for the next 5 minutes. If music isn't your thing, that's okay. You can put me on mute, and we'll come back together at 10:27. Side note, as you find things, we encourage you to save them to our folder, but definitely by the end of 5 minutes, we'd like for you to have found one resource that you're going to explore deeper today and post your link in the chat. I do, for accessibility reasons, just want to point out that Zoom now allows you to use descriptive hyperlinks. So you would type your term, such as economic term, and then you would highlight it and use that hyperlink button so we don't end up with really long URLs in our chat, which are really inaccessible for screen readers. So 10:27, come back with at least one resource that permits derivatives and you want to look at more today.
And I'll add too, if anybody has questions that you'd like to ask, this is also a kind of a good time to do that, either in the chat or you can unmute. And so these have actually been designed so that they can be adapted very sort of what do I want to say? Actually, they have features within them that allows users to select specific versions of these for one specific type of adaptability that I'm going to mention, which is languages. So there are different language versions of these that are part of sort of the design of these. And so when you want to adapt it, you may not personally have to do the adaptation, but you can find part of the resource that allows you maybe to adapt it for whatever your particular purpose is. In this case, we're going to focus on the language accessibility. The other types of who's often are, when a teacher chooses to adapt OER materials for students prior to use. And that is probably the bigger global sort of umbrella that this particular webinar focuses on. And then there's other instances where the user, either the student or whoever is using the OER, can adapt those materials as they are engaging with it. And again, some systems provide those tools within the design of the OER itself. And so I think one of the things to look at is that OER sort of exists on a continuum. It is not a one-size-fits-all thing, that we can have, individual OER materials that are created by a teacher and shared, like me. And in that I may just be sharing what it is that I've created as a Google Doc or a Word document or a PDF. And so the way in which I share that may be more fixed. If I choose to share, say, a PDF of a lesson that I've created, that OER tends to be a little bit more fixed. It's not to say that somebody can't take it and adapt it and extract the information, but it's being shared in a way that makes it maybe just a little bit more challenging, say, than if I were to share a resource that I've created as a Google Doc, where that text can be sort of lifted out of there. And we have the same thing that happens with institutions that may be creating and sharing OER. And then we've got what we see sort of emerging is this, a lot of institutions that are creating OER are actually creating sort of these beautiful systems that are very interactive and engaging. We'll have a couple of examples of those. LibreText is one that I can say, OpenCourseWare, Pressbooks. Some of these sort of OER infrastructures these days have the ability not only to create and share resources, but they've built into the design of that a lot of different features that make adapting, sharing, and remixing very easy, both for an individual teacher doing this, or even in many cases like LibreText, the student, as they're reading that, can go in and adjust how that text is being delivered to them, like light or dark mode, different font colors, all different kinds of features. So.
Thanks, Teresa. So let's take a minute and brainstorm, and feel free to unmute if you would like. We'd love to have your voice be part of the conversation, or you can put it in the chat box. What are some reasons that someone might want to adapt an OER? So this can be really broad in general, or this could be really specific to your experience and your context. So help make your thinking visible. Thanks, Ashley. She shared in the chat box about customizing material for a specific course. Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting is, you can have a standard course of study in K-12, but it might get taught differently at different schools in different geographical areas. You might have some students who need a little bit of extra remediation and other students who need some advancement. So to Stacy's point about being able to differentiate a material, to be able to take one example resource and be able to say, hey, I'm going to change it this way for this group of students and this way for this group of students. KT brings up our science labs, right? And maybe I don't have these particular resources, but I'll do it this different way. I know in biology, we do a great Eladia lab, but sometimes we can't find that plant at the aquarium, so we have to go find it somewhere else or find a substitute. Corey, yes, customizing for our English language learners, our multilingual learners, or our students with disabilities. I'll bring up another reason. Sometimes we just want it to be more relevant. Sometimes something happened yesterday and we want to be able to change the resource to be able to address what happened yesterday, what's happening tomorrow, what is the latest research that came out on such and such. When we talk about students with different reading levels and we want to be able to customize it for our students with reading levels. So many important reasons. So some reasons that Teresa wanted us to look at and talk about, you already mentioned alternative language needs for our learners, being able to change the modality of the OER. It's really interesting. So many people created videos of themselves lecturing and teaching, but if they don't have captions, then that can be exclusionary for our students who might have a hearing impairment. And so to be able to add captions, you need the resource to be openly licensed so that you can modify the resource. We talked about localizing it and personalizing it, fit your classroom demographic, adapting the academic level, and addressing accessibility needs for some of our students. So as Teresa mentioned, UC Boulder, their PhET simulations, they already have been translated into different languages. So some of your resources are already going to be translated. But again, that's the great thing about OER is that if it's remixable, if it gives us that license, then we can actually make those changes to it. A little bit more information is that you can, if it is adaptable, you can actually make changes of the modality as Teresa shared. So we can go from print to an audio file, right? I have a lot of students who like to listen to me read it as they read it. It helps their brain process. It's also really helpful for our language learners to hear the pronunciation of words, to be able to make videos of things in accessibility. If we're talking about, for example, this particular map, I'm not sure how accessible it is according to a screen reader. So someone who has full visual ability, they're able to see this and process it. A screen reader would not be able to describe this very well. And alt text wouldn't work very well either. So what we would need is a long description, which can be hard for some brains to access all of that written out as a transcript. So you can actually, using Universal Design for Learning, you can actually create a recording of yourself describing this, where you would say, this is a flat map of the entire Earth globe with some epicenter pins on it that you can hover over that are interactive, that list different countries that have legends and folk tales. There are 2 in North America, 6 in South America, and then you would be prepared to be able to describe the rest of what you see on this flat map, right? And then that way a user would be using a different modality to still get the same experience, the equivalent experience. When we talk about site context, being able to add in local names, landmarks, historical events, someone might create a resource about watersheds and they might be using the local names of their city, and you could be able to add your example Teresa shared a particular resource here that is currently shared as a PDF. So in order to access this, we need to be able to get the Word document or editable version of it, but you can make those changes because this has, once you know, you can't unknow, right? It has CC BY, which means that I can modify this however I want. I'll just need to give attribution and credit based on what is listed there. And so we might want to change to include different photos and images. We might want to include 504 and IEP accommodations. We might want to adapt certain materials to be used on different levels. So some really great examples here of the how and the why. And as Teresa mentioned, certain platforms are built with accessibility in mind. So today, as we explore OER Colorado, we'll be able to see how there's actually an accessibility checker built in to our tool on OER Colorado called OpenAuthor. And so what you can see is that a lot of OER platforms now are prioritizing accessibility and adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa, do you want to share some of the specific accessibility tools that you wanted to point out?
Sure. And actually, maybe if you could go back one slide quickly. So again, sort of looking at OER on a continuum from, individual people sort of creating and sharing individual resources, or institutions doing sort of an old school share like we looked at with the series. Lesson series is also an environmental science OER project that comes from UC Boulder, and they've got both, older, they've been around for many, many, many years, and so they've got older resources that are sort of in a PDF format, and then newer resources that take on different formats as well. And then we've got all the way to really these sort of one-stop platforms. If you think about a lot of the different courseware that's being produced by some of the publishing companies, where they've got, ebooks, e-learning materials and things. We have OER equivalents of many of those. So LibreText is one. There's several different sort of OER text open education textbook platforms. LibreText is one. There's OpenStax, there's Pressbooks, there's OpenCourseWare. But I'm going to use LibreText here as the example for this. If you go into some of the hyperlinks that I put there, I put the pre-K-12 library that you can access with the different books. And within this system, so if you're going into one of the textbooks that they have several different ways that you can access this material. They have the book itself that comes up. Then in the upper right-hand corner, they've got a reader mode that a student can go into, and that affords some tools. It's very easy for it to be screen readable because it's been specifically designed for that. So a screen reader would be able to access this very easily. And then on the left-hand side, they've got a series of vertical toolbars that you can see from the image that's here. And you can feel free to follow along if you're engaging interactively with that. And one of the ones is, you can slide these, they have these additional toolbars that will slide out, and you can, the user, while they're reading this, can make adjustments that allow them to be able to sort of put whatever their ideal reading mode is to be able to access the text here. They've got features where you can annotate the text as you go for your particular copy. You can also print these. Say, for instance, you work in a school where you don't have a lot of access to technology. These ebooks are also generated and organized in a way that allows you to print them, to print different sections. And then within that, they've also got this sort of built-in remixing system that educators can go in, and maybe you only want to do, the first 3 chapters of this book and then skip to the last one. You can basically tell it which of these sections you want the students to be able to have access to in a very easy way. And they've got supplemental tools built in for this particular one. Oftentimes they'll have like for the science ones, they'll have an interactive periodic table of the elements, a scientific calculator, again, that are in sort of these sidebars that will slide in and allow them to be very easily accessible for the students. So I think there may be, I wanted to, one of the reasons I wanted to point this out with this particular webinar is to examine the quality of design that a lot of the e-textbooks in the open educational resources space are utilizing. LibreText is also moving towards being able to allow AI translation of its texts. So say, for instance, in our particular little area here of Colorado, we have several different Afghan immigrant families who have been incorporated into our schools. And in order to be able to welcome them, it might be nice to be able to have initially some of the textbooks and resources available in a language that was accessible for them. So being able to access some of these new features that are coming out is a definite plus in terms of that adaptability for the OER sort of being baked into or built into the system itself. You can move to the next one. And then from there, if we're looking at one of the other things that we do want educators to know when using our system is that OER Colorado is a repository of resources. So the idea is that we would sort of pull together, use the technology from the Institute for Shared Knowledge Management and Education, which is ISKME. We would use the system that they have provided to us to create a repository of open educational resources from different institutions across Colorado, across the United States, and even some which are global, and bring those and make those available to teachers to use, to educators. Now, the one thing we can't do when we bring that in, we just don't have the bandwidth to sort of standardize those resources across a full set of requirements. And so we bring them in as is, knowing that some are coming in to you fully accessible, and others are going to be things that, you are potentially able to customize on your own, but you may have to be the one that does the checking to make sure that they do meet whatever the accessibility requirements are for your particular school system or district. And when you're putting together, say, like a website, Colorado has new accessibility standards that are, across the board for different websites. But when you're in your classroom, you may have one or two different children, and they're both on maybe an IEP and a 504 plan, and they've got different modifications that are sort of required for each of them, or accommodations. And the nice thing about the OER would be to allow you to sort of like go in, find a resource that does allow derivatives, allow customization, and for you to be able to then create and adapt that resource to specifically meet the needs of that student. So if they're on a 504 plan, maybe they need to have graphic organizers. So you might be doing a lesson with a publisher where you're doing, we looked at folktales a minute ago, but maybe you're doing folktales. If you want like the students that are on an accommodation plan to be able to maybe stay with the same content as the class, but be able to have a resource that has been sort of customized to fit what their particular 504 IEP plan says, you might be able to find an OER resource and then add some graphic organizers to it, or to be able to chunk that information. And so they're still learning the same topic that the rest of the class is, but now they've got a resource that has been adapted to fit whatever their particular needs are as a student. One of the things, like I said, this is sort of a top level survey of this whole process. But we've linked out some accessibility tools in there if you're working, with different web resources that have been provided, like on a website that are linked out. Like I put in here, there's let's see, my resource that I picked was using folktales vowel influences on the letter G. And this is from Read, Write, Think, which is a large institutional provider of OER resources. They've probably already done the accessibility checking, so you can be pretty sure that it's pretty good to go. But if you needed to do an outside accessibility check on that, there's a couple of free links here to check the contrast on the text, and to just do a general scan of the resources that you're planning on using to make sure that that they would be something that you could use in a classroom environment.
Thanks, Teresa. So, a note about accessibility. If this is new to you, then feel free to explore this a little bit deeper. Teresa's provided a great definition of accessibility and what it looks like for OER Colorado. And one of the big things is that making sure that you're checking that license. So when you find a resource and you're looking at, can I make these adaptations? So we want to offer to you 3 main steps to think about when you're adapting your OER. We'll dig deeper into each of these steps and you'll have some time to practice in a minute. The first is check to ensure you have the right to adapt that particular OER. And that's really going to come down to the terms of the license. Next, you want to determine what your focus of adaptations will be. So as Teresa was mentioning, do you have a particular student in mind that you're thinking about? Did you notice that it has some out-of-date information and you're trying to make sure that everything is relevant? And so we have some tools on the platform that will help you really be able to give both the big overview of what does the resource look like, but dig deeply into some best practices of pedagogy. Then we want to finally make the changes and make sure that you're giving attribution before you publish it, right? And so at the end, voila, you're a new publisher. So real quickly, when adapting an OER, it's important to check that the license is compatible with the adaptations that you want to make. So first, you want to just see, can I change this original work? As a side note, if it has no derivatives in the license, then you cannot remix or adapt it. If it has educational use permitted or a custom license, you probably need to read further and possibly contact the author. Some licenses, such as Share Alike, will allow you to make adaptations, but you might have to use the same exact license. So let's take a second and look at your particular resource. If you don't have one to look at, you can look at mine as well. I'm sharing it on the screen. This is called Describing Countries in Economic Terms. And one of the things that we've worked really hard at ISKME, OER Commons, and OER Colorado to do is make that license really clear so that you can find it quickly, you know where to look for it. So with this particular resource, can I make a derivative? Absolutely. Can I relicense and change the license of that derivative? Absolutely. Could I put it in an anthology that might be sold at a commercial space? Absolutely. This is CC BY. The only thing I have to do is I have to give attribution. So when I create something, I have to give attribution back to Rebecca Burley. When we are checking the license of additional works that we want to include, so for example, if I look at my describing countries in economic terms, one of the things that jumps out at me about this resource is the title is How Can We Describe Different World Economies? This image, to me, it is described as being in Jamaica. I get that tourism is a big part of the economy in Jamaica, but I might not choose for that to be the first image my students see when I'm talking about world economies or I'm talking about local economies. So if I want to change that image and put a different image in, I can go looking for them. Just a side note, if you've never done if most of you have probably done a Google image search, but I want to point out to you that when you do a Google image search, Google actually has a tool that allows you to search by license. So I can actually go in and I can search by Creative Commons license. I do have to double check it, but you'll see that now what is popping up are resources that I know that I can use because it's going to easily help me find the particular licensing on it. And so this is from the New York City Department of Transportation. So that's actually going to be public domain. Right, this is Jamaica in New York, so not the right image, right? So as you're searching and looking for different things, of course, it becomes complicated, and finding images is always a big part of the OER world that we're talking about. But I included this chart for you because when you're making adaptations, it's really important to kind of cross-check that if my original source is public domain and I want to add something to it, I couldn't add an image that says CC by ND because I'm not allowed to use it any differently than it originally was. Any questions about licensing? So we're going to take a minute or two here for you to look at your resource, figure out the license for your resource, and also think about what can you remix it with. If this had CC by SA on it, I could only remix it with things that allow me to use the CC by SA license as well. Anybody want to unmute and tell us about their resource and the licensing of their resource? We've got some stuff showing up in the chat. KT.
Yeah, KT Thompson shared their license and have a good explanation of what types of uses they're able to do with that, so long as they're not making money off of it, so non-commercial.
Yes, and so now that you see these licenses, CC by NC, non-commercial, CC by ND, it'll start to make a lot more sense and make the work a lot easier. So step 2 is determining the focus of your adaptation, right? Sometimes we can be looking at a resource and go, well, I don't know exactly so many things that I want to change about it. And so what we want to offer to you is that there is a tool on the OER Colorado platform. It's on the landing page of each resource. So one of the things that we've tried to do with ISKME, OER Commons, and OER Colorado is kind of crowdsource this idea of evaluation. Not everyone needs to be able to do a full, thorough, maybe 20-point inspection of a resource. So maybe the curriculum provider at your organization is going to do that. And so you're welcome to. Anyone who has a registered account can leave stars, can leave comments, and anyone can leave an evaluation. So if you want to play along with me, you can click the evaluate button, and it will open a pop-up box to the right, a window within a window, and you can start evaluating. And so one of the things that we want you to be able to do is align it first. And I'm going to remove this a little bit later. And I'm going to get all the way down to my alignment and add my alignment. Right. And so then from there, I can actually explore the different terms that are part of this particular evaluation. And that will help me really be able to think, what is it that I want to change about my resource? What are the aspects that are really important to me? Is it technology integration? Is it clear assessments and aligned assessments? Is it clear learning goals? Is it helping students reach higher learning? So we really want to be able to stop and think, what is it that is most important to you? And Teresa, if you want to share a little bit about this adapting or modifying OER from Colorado Mesa.
We have a lot of, so The practice of using open education and open educational resources has been around in Colorado higher education for many, many years. There's even an OER council and membership at each of the higher education organizations. So it's been a really wonderful to see the resources that they've provided and shared. And those are accessible and available oftentimes for pre-K-12 educators who are learning and more getting familiar with OER. This is one from Colorado Mesa University. So I chose this. It's a great resource. It's also kind of over here in Grand Junction in the area that I'm at. And they have a really nice guide for adapting or modifying open educational resources. Now, this has been tailored to their faculty. So there is a suggestion that they use the library on campus. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that, that pre-K-12 educators do that. But the other steps that they've included here are very valuable and very nice guide in terms of trying to see whether or not it makes sense to adapt or modify an OER and then sort of like reshare that. Like, are there other steps that you can take to find resources maybe without having to go through the adapting and modifying steps? Are you doing it formally or informally? So there's different ways that you can adapt resources. You can pull down a resource and so long as it's no derivative, doesn't include no derivatives, you can adapt that and share that within your own classroom, change it for your particular educational context. And that may not mean it goes any further than that. You may just be adapting it to use it in your classroom. But as Joanna was showing you, as we go through the process of evaluating the different OER resources that we have on the site, using some of the built-in tools, especially one of the things we would encourage pre-K-12 educators to do, we have built in the next generation science standards. We've built in Common Core ELA and Common Core math standards. Many, many resources are already aligned to those, but there are some that don't have an alignment yet. And so, if you find a resource that you like and you're using, go in and help us to do that alignment on it. And maybe you're finding that that it needs a little bit of an update. Like I said, some of these materials are really high quality materials. There may be some things from, say, our environmental providers where they're having you do, an outdoor lab evaluating the ecosystem of a stream and a river. But maybe, like the articles that link out supporting that are a little bit dated. Maybe they're from like the early 2000s. And that there is updated resources for that to link out. And you'd like to, freshen that up and help maintain that curriculum. So you decide to go in and do an adaptation that you're not only going to use in your classroom environment, but you're actually then going to publish that, put those updates back on the OER Colorado site, let everybody know, hey, really solid, really great resource, amazing lab activity. However, I have linked out to more updated supporting research for this, and here is the revised OER. And so our system allows you to be able to do that.
Thanks, Teresa. And that's exactly what I want to show you all next, which is the great tool that is there for actually remixing. So just to make sure that you have some time to do the remixing, I want to show you that on OER Colorado and encourage you to play along with me. When we look at the particular resource that I shared with you, describing countries in economic terms, you can see the license allows for remixing, which is great. If something is in a PDF form, that makes it hard to remix. I can copy paste, take screenshots, retype it, but we want to make it easy for folks to do remixing. So if you're on OER Colorado, if it was built on the platform using our authoring tool called OpenAuthor, if it was built there, then I can remix it on the platform. All I have to do is click remix. And it's going to do something kind of like file make a copy inside Google Drive. where it's going to make an exact copy that now lives in my items. It's currently in draft form, and I can change this. So I might say remix of describing countries in economic terms. And a best practice is always to describe real quickly why you're doing the remix. So I might say to localize images, right? And so I can change anything that I want here. So I can change this particular image and I can say, well, you know what? I really do want to have a picture of the Jamaica like fishing. And so I'm going to use my tools, make sure that I am looking at Creative Commons licenses, right? And so I might be able to go here and choose an image that I want here about this particular resource. Wikimedia is a great place for images because they are required to be openly licensed on there. And the attribution is always really clearly given here. So if I wanted to use this image, it's a CC by SA. So anything that I create would have to be CC by SA. But I can take that image and then I can put it in. This is already a captioned image, but I'm going to create it as a caption. Interesting. It wouldn't let me put the image in because I hadn't put alt text in. So it's one of the things that's really important to me about the OpenAuthor tool is it reminds me of my accessibility best practices. So sometimes you can go grab alt text from a particular resource. So that's great. This one already kind of has an alt text ready for me. And then I can add my image in. And of course I can resize it and move it around. And then I can add my caption to it as well. And so once I make those changes, then I can, keep going and continue to make changes. And when I'm ready to publish it, once I've made those changes, of course, I would want to save. It does auto save when you add new sections, but it's always a great practice just to add save. And then when I click next, this is where it is going to ask me to describe the overview again. So this is where I'm going to give some explanation about why this resource was customized. That'll help other people find it. The keywords that I put here in the overview.
And just as if you're not as familiar with this, the alt text as an accessibility practice, what's nice is that it helps folks with low vision or who may be blind to be able to access the information via a screen reader or technology that is interpreting the text for them. So it gives them a written version or an audio version of what we're seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Those screen readers will read that alt text. And so I do have to note that now I have to change my license. If I wanted to use that particular image that was CC by SA, I have to change my license, which I'm allowed to do. And then I can go in and add the rest of my metadata, which makes it discoverable by other folks. So I want to explain why I made the changes that I made. And perhaps I want to align it to a standard. And then at the bottom, I say, I promise I have all of these rights. And here's the cool thing that once I've done that remixing, because most of us are used to doing that in Google Drive, right? We get links to, hey, file, make a copy of this. We know how to do that. But it's hard to find where did the resource come from? And what happened to the original resource, right? So how do I see that? So a really valuable tool on OER Colorado is what's called the version history. So you can see that my new copy, right? It says author Joanna Scammizzi, I'm a published author. It will tell you that this one was remixed from, and then I can directly go to that particular resource. So here's the original. Now the original has a version history, and it shows you that the original was actually remixed. And you can see that when I title it remix and I add this idea of describing why I remixed it, that if all of you now went in and remixed Rebecca Burley's Describing Countries in Economic Terms, then we would be able to see those versions show up in this version history. So it would be this great stepping stone path with these breadcrumbs to be able to show you, here was an original resource. Here's how someone adapted it to add localized images, or adapted it to add a graphic organizer, or adapted it to add captions, or adapted it to translate it. And so it's a really important piece of the remix tool. Side note, if it has the license, but it doesn't have the remix button, it's because it wasn't created on the platform. You can then go and add OER in OpenAuthor. And as long as you have the right license, you can copy and paste whatever you want. Just make sure you give attribution. I didn't have to give a lot of attribution in mine because remember, mine is actually going to directly show that it was a remix. So the platform, if you remix on the platform, automatically gives attribution.
Joanne, if you go back for a minute to where you remixed it, I think I'm going to ask, would you just show quickly? So there's a set of toolbars down at the bottom if educators maybe want to add that to their Google Classroom, or they want to share that out now that you've remixed it, how they might easily do that.
Absolutely. So you can download any of the resources. You can also share it via social media, or if you have the integration, you can share it with your Google Classroom. So you'd have to be able to log in there and share it to your Google Classroom. I do also want to show that once you are the owner of it, you can edit it at any time. And so I might go in and I might actually I want to show you how to run the accessibility checker, right? So we have a button, and you'll see this button on other platforms. It's a circle with this kind of stick figure image inside, and it's for accessibility. So Canvas has that button. And if you run the accessibility checker, this particular document doesn't have any accessibility issues. But let's say that I wanted to add some headings in. And I'm not sure, I think this is heading 3, right? Once I run the accessibility checker, then it might be able to tell me if it is or isn't. So it is heading 3 because H1 is the title, H2 is the section name. So any headings inside my resource would need to be H3. And so that is one way that the platform is built to help you know, do I have all my alt text? Do I have the correct headings? Are all of my hyperlinks descriptive? And so it's a really great tool as you are doing those remixes to be able to design with accessibility in mind. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to play and practice. Your choices are, you could practice remixing. I'm going to put my particular resource back into the chat box in case you want to just play around with an example. If your resource allows you to remix, you can. And then you can also just play around a little bit on OpenAuthor and start to create and change things there. So I'm going to put the link to my resource.
Joanna, one thing to let people know is that if they do a remix, does it automatically show up on the site, or are there steps that have to be taken for that to occur?
Oh, that's a great question. Mine automatically show up because I have superpowers. I have super admin rights.
Super admin.
Other users, your resource will say that it has been published, but it's going to go into a queue for someone from OER Colorado to give a quick look to, because they want to make sure that there aren't any copyright violations or any other sort of errors that might have occurred. Sometimes a spam user might try to put something in. So there's a practice and a series in there to make sure that a resource is actually ready to be displayed. So let's take about 5 to 7 minutes for you might need to go back to searching. Maybe that's what your brain is saying, but hopefully you're ready to either remix some things such as the resource that I've provided just to play with, or if you need to remix by creating something new, hopefully in the next 7 minutes, you'll press publish and you'll be an author on OER Colorado. As Teresa said before, now's a great time for any questions, so I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also just going to play some music in the background, so if you don't like the music, you can go on mute, and we're going to come back together at 11:21.
Before you leave, I think I maybe have one question too, is so the image that you grabbed off of Google was a share alike. And your original copyright for the original resource was what happens if one of the Creative Commons licenses is a little bit more restrictive and the other is a little bit less restrictive and you're remixing things together? How does that work?
Sure. Yep. So this particular image, and just as a side note, in the alt text of this image is a link to a narrated version that describes this table. This isn't even a table, it's an image of a table. So the image isn't accessible to all, but it has information to learn from. So there's a video that explains the table. So this table is going to help you look at when you're adapting, which ones are compatible, right? So my original resource from Rebecca Burley is CC BY. And then the image that I wanted to use is CC BY SA. And so in order to honor that, if here's my original CC BY, I can use something that is CC BY SA. I just have to change my derivatives license to CC BY SA, which is what I did when I went to publish it. I changed it from CC BY, which is the original. If I remix it again, and let's just put test up here. When I go to next, it's going to ask me to double check my conditions of use, and it will auto-populate with the license of the original. I know that because I use that other image, I have to change the licensing. So now I have to say CC BY SA because that's the license of this particular image. This table that's in your slide deck gives you a really good kind of check on, am I allowed to do these things with it? So if my license is more restrictive, like no derivative, I can't remix it with any of these because I'm not even allowed to make a remix. If my license is by NC-SA, I can make all sorts of remixes, but I can't with this SA license because this SA is CC BY SA, which means if I make a derivative, it has to be CC BY SA. It can't have non-commercial on it. It can't have no derivatives on it, and it can't have by non-commercial, no derivative. It can't be more restrictive than what the original license was. Great question. So for those of you working on remixing or authoring or still just searching, that's fine. We'll check in with each other in about 4 minutes, and I'm happy to answer other questions along the way as well. Okay, so coming on back. And in the chat box, if you will just share what it is that you noticed or found. And so if you're willing to unmute, we would love for you to be able to do that, because we'd love to hear your voice, have your voice be part of the discussion.
I guess one of the things I saw in doing this was the original resource I had selected has just kind of a brief record, but there's a lot more that you can add in there in the different sections and all of that to create something that's really, really detailed and rich. I did try, I didn't publish anything because I'm just playing around, but I did try to add you, Joanna, as a co-author, but it did not find me. So how do you search for co-authors in here?
Oh, great question. It didn't find me?
No. And I just typed in your name, so I wasn't sure if I should have had an email address or something else.
Yeah, that's strange. I've gone incognito, I guess. Usually you can search just by someone's name, their last name, their first name, or their email address. So that's strange that it didn't find me. I'll have to find whatever gremlin is hiding, is sending me a message like, go into hiding. But yes, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because when you add a co-author, not only are they receiving attribution, but they can edit the resource with you as well. So that's a great point. Thank you.
And definitely to add to that, like one of the benefits of this platform in general is a lot of the collaborative tools and the collaborative nature of it. And we would highly encourage, educators to form groups and collaborate around curriculum. Like you said, if you found a resource that's sort of like the foundation of something that you wanted to create or craft, for your particular school, maybe in a niche curriculum, or something if you're doing, say, maybe a thematic unit. I know one year when I taught sixth grade summer school, we did the Middle Ages, and so we did this whole integrated thematic unit around that with math, science, social studies, and there would be a lot of resources where you could sort of start with a initial resource that somebody had created and then build on that for your particular site context. And definitely collaborating by sharing authorship, sharing these resources in groups would be a nice way to use the site.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, I'll add on to that as well, because if you are collaborating in a group, you can create your own group for your, collaboration, right? So you can go to see all groups and see if a group exists, and then you can create a group. And then from there, you can create folders within those groups and really use this as a place for collaboration. You can create those discussion boards that are part of it as well. And so we're just really excited to have you all be able to join in and explore on OER Colorado. Anything else that folks are seeing or noticing? We'd love to hear your experiences, what you found, or maybe what you didn't yet find.
One last little thing I'll add in the time we have left, John, if you go to the Add OER. So we've talked in this particular session about adding OER with the Open Author tool, but there is another area where you can submit from web. So if you found an Open Author, an OER resource that's out there online, a government site, maybe Parks and Wildlife, that you'd like to add, and they've got a link to this on their website, feel free. You can submit a resource in this particular way. So it's another way of adding OER to the site. And one of the other last, I guess, little things that I'll say too is oftentimes we have things like maybe a YouTube video or something that as Kelly was talking about, maybe you wanted to build around that, but you're not quite sure whether or not that is a fully OER type resource. You can use that as a starting point, or say maybe a news article where you can link out to that in the open author tool, and then you can build, say, a set of questions around that. Maybe they would read that article that's available online, but maybe is not fully OER, and then you can add questions and things to that. And then what you're adding and contributing is this sort of the OER framework around which students might access that video or that other resource that lives online.
Yes, I love that, Teresa. Thank you. We love text sets. We love encouraging folks to contribute things that they've already found. So right now, I'd just like to, as we wrap up, I'd like to ask you to refresh your screen, because what I've done is I've added our discussion board link and our reflection survey. So if you're wanting to get the certificate of participation for today's webinar, then these are two things that you would need to fill out today or in the next few days. We'll send out a reminder later this week and then again early next week. It takes me about 24 to 48 hours to caption our video. So as soon as I get the video downloaded, captioned, and then uploaded to our hosting platform, then I'll share that link out with you. And so I'm just going to put the link to the published slide deck in one more time. And this link has both the discussion board link and the quick survey that you'll take. And that is on slide number 31. So if you would navigate, please, to slide 31. I can also put the individual links in here. It's just a lot more to navigate. So here's our webinar 2 discussion board, where we just want you to make your thinking visible, like some others did already. What is it that you might be modifying in the next few weeks? And then why might you make those modifications? Right. And so this is really valuable because sometimes other people aren't even thinking about, oh, I might add this particular, type of video, or I might add this particular link to this. So for maybe you have a graphic organizer generator tool that you use, right? So you could be able to share those specific things that you're wanting to do. So as we finish up today at our time stop, I do want to thank you very much for attending and participating, and then also just invite you to fill out this survey and participate in the discussion board. If you have any questions, I can stay on for a few more minutes, and otherwise we look forward to seeing you in the fall at our very last 2 webinars.